Princess Aurora gets a pretty bad rep. Out of all the Disney princesses, she seems to be put down the most, and I have hereby decided that it is time this unjust persecution is challenged. Firstly, let's take a look at Aurora's behavior when we first meet her in the cottage. She's likely pretty capable of taking care of herself, given the utter incompetency of the three fairies who are supposed to be her guardians. Though it's highly likely Merryweather did the brunt of the work, it could certainly be inferred that Aurora has grown up somewhat independently. Additionally to accusations that Aurora is a wooden plank, it is apparent that she has a bit of a sense of humor. We can see this in her playful conversations with the fairies, when she knows that the fairies are up to something but plays along and acts like she doesn't.
Well, and what are you three dears up to?
Up to? Well, we want you to pick some berries. That's it, berries!
And again, in the forest when she's playing make-believe with her animal friends. As we see her interact with her animal companions, she appears playful and good-natured, and while the whole love at first sight thing is an incredibly debatable staple of classic Disney films, there is one word of defense to be said for Aurora's case, which is that Philip is not only the only man she's ever encountered, but as far as we know, he's also the only human being besides the fairies that she's ever met. So with this in mind, it would be pretty like, wow, if you had never met another human being before, except your aunts, and then suddenly one just showed up, and you'd be like, oh, this is fascinating. However, since love at first sight is such a common thread in not only Disney movies, but basically any movie that has no time to develop an actually believable love story, I consider this to be a rather minor issue in these forest scenes. Another scene which could be considered damning is when the fairies tell her she can't see Philip again and she flings herself onto her bed in an overwrought, borderline hysterical reaction. Though melodramatic, we should keep in mind that she is only 16. And, again, we should remember that she does feel trapped and lonesome simply living in the forest with the fairies. So to emphasize, this denial from her adopted aunts could certainly appear cruel, basically forcing her to stay in a secluded existence. And the main thing would be she just learned that her entire life is a lie, and that revelation like that would definitely be difficult to process, especially for someone as young as Aurora, who has just been under the impression that she just turned over a new leaf, i.e. meeting Philip. So this should all be kept in mind with this scene, because she's basically going through an identity crisis for all intents and purposes. The real test comes when she chooses what to do with this information. Does she try to escape? Does she rebel against the fairies and say they aren't fair? No, Aurora does none of these things. Instead, she pulls herself together just enough to return with the fairies, even though it is the exact opposite of what she wants. Though many would point to this as a moment of weakness, probably highlighting the fact that Jasmine found herself in a similar situation, and she took matters into her own hands. However, I think this is the quiet power of Aurora. Though she only has roughly 16-ish lines in the film, she has a presence unlike any of the other princesses. Her grace, kindness should be highlighted. While she could have tried to run away, she has enough sense to realize this action would be pointless. Where would she go? How would she evade Maleficent further? Where would she live? How would she find Philip again anyway? Should she actually betray the ones who cared for her even though they are the sole cause for her current identity crisis? These are all questions that could be possibly kind of running through her head, and her strength appears in the fact that she is sensible enough to weigh her options and respond accordingly. I mean, really stop and think about it. What choice did she really have in the matter? Not much. Her odds of survival would look pretty bleak under such circumstances, particularly since I'm assuming the fairies told her about why she was hidden for 16 years, aka evil fairy was trying to murder her. Another aspect you could consider is the fact that perhaps she felt a sense of duty and responsibility due to her new status as a princess, perhaps even to the fairies themselves, even though they lied to her about everything she ever believed. While this is an interesting aspect to consider, it's not really supported within the confines of the film itself, as Aurora seems far more distraught by the fact that she'll never see Philip again, and all that kind of stuff. However, it is something that I personally thought for some time, and it's just sort of an interesting thing to consider. However, aside from all these things I just raised, all these issues that people have raised before, the most hated aspect of Aurora's story is that she gets cursed and needs to be rescued by Philip, and she's useless because she can't save herself. Now, I contend this point with the statement, or actually really question, what exactly was she supposed to do? It's not like Ariel, who walked right into her problem, or Snow White, who took an apple from an obviously evil person, or even Cinderella, who arguably could have left the abusive home and become a maid elsewhere, even though that's a whole nother can of worms of abusers, and what would she do? Because you could say she didn't really have an option either. But people will defend Cinderella, but they won't defend Sleeping Beauty. That's the only reason I'm bringing this up. Aurora didn't have any decision at all about her fate. She just lived in a woods for her entire life, turned 16, went back to the castle to adhere to her duties of and responsibilities of princess, and that's what she had to do. Got hypnotized into touching an evil spindle. Like, what girl boss decision was she supposed to be making exactly? It's actually really more on the fairies when they left her alone in the room when they knew Maleficent would try to kill her under any and all circumstances. Another point I would like to stress concerning this accusation is that we see Aurora has a lot of fight in her. She must, because she is able to resist Maleficent's hypnosis spell right before touching the spindle. I mean, she does end up touching it, but the point still stands that she managed to fight the spell on some level, with some aid from Merryweather's voice when she says, "Don't touch anything."
Don't touch anything!
Touch the spindle. Touch it, I say.
And she's able to kind of draw it back for a second there, which shows incredibly strong fight. It really comes down to Aurora having kind of sucky circumstances, and she just kind of did the best she could under said circumstances. Okay, another thing that I just have to mention, even though it's more of a defense of Prince Philip, is the fact that everyone, and I mean everyone, always says, well, in the book she's assaulted in a way that rhymes with grape by the prince, so Philip is evil. And this annoys me so much, firstly because it depends on what story you read, and secondly because the original story and the Disney version have absolutely nothing in common, except there's a person who sleeps for a really long time. Like, Philip is one of the best princes. It's like, no, he did not assault her. Firstly, they had met before, so it wasn't just some random woman. And secondly, the fairies specifically told him how to break the curse. You're really gonna stand here and tell me that you'd rather be cursed forever than have your crush kiss you when you're under a sleeping spell so that you can wake up and go back to normal? Like, no. With Snow White, I can see why people would have more of a problem, because the prince just walks up to a presumably dead body without any background information about what happened and kisses it. Like, I mean, yeah, he did sing a song with her, but kissing a dead body is kind of weird. But going back to Philip, he knew exactly what happened and exactly what to do to fix it. So there's no problem here. At the end of the day, the real travesty is that we didn't get to see much of Aurora's internal struggle. Like, how did she process this identity crisis of thinking you're a peasant and then suddenly figuring out your aunts lied to you and you're actually a princess and all that kind of stuff? Like, that's the conclusion I've always come to. It's just really a shame we didn't get to see more of her in her own movie, as opposed to she's lame. It's more like, well, she just didn't get to be in it that much. That's what I've always kind of thought. I just felt compelled to make this video because there's a lot of people on the internet who will defend any of the other Disney princesses, but for some reason Aurora is frequently left out. Or they'll just be like, yeah, it's fine to be mad about her not being a girl boss or whatever. And it's like you're gonna tell me that you're gonna defend Snow White, who actually was able to make certain choices, aka the apple choice, but Aurora, who literally had no option, was just trying to do the right thing by going back to the castle, is indefensible? And I'm not saying that you can't defend Snow White, I'm just saying I don't quite understand why Aurora always gets the short end of the stick in these discussions. Maybe I'm just biased because she was always my favorite. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Share which princess is your favorite and why in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and have an awesome rest of your day.